Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 11th public lecture hosted by NUS Cities. Before we start the event, please ensure your mobile devices are all either on silent or powered off. Thanks. For those who don't know about NUS Cities, we are a university-wide, multidisciplinary, open and inclusive collaborative platform hosted within the College of Design and Engineering, otherwise known as CDE. Through our collaborations with local and international institutions, we hope to create synergies within NUS as well as beyond. The NUS Cities Public Lecture Series will investigate policies, ideas, and projects developed by urban experts which aspire to create sustainable, resilient, and livable cities. Through the lecture series, we hope to create a platform for discussion, retrospection, and conversation to give momentum to the ongoing research and exploration regarding issues concerning cities. I would now like to introduce our speaker of the evening. Dr. Jonathan Reichental is the founder of Human Future, a global business and technology advisory, investment, and education firm. His previous roles have included being the software engineering manager, director of technology innovation, and he has also served as the chief information officer at both O'Reilly Media as well as the city of Palo, Alto in California. In 2013, he was recognized as one of 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers in the government of America. In 2016, he was named a top influential CIO in the United States, and in 2017, he was named one of the top 100 CIOs in the world. Dr. Reichental is a recognized global thought leader on a number of emerging trends, including urban innovation, smart cities, sustainability, blockchain technology, data governance, the fourth industrial revolution, and digital transformation. He holds several degrees, including a PhD in information systems. He's an adjunct professor in the School of Management at the University of San Francisco and also interests at several other universities, including NUS. He has written 3 books on the future of cities, Smart Cities for Dummies, Exploring Smart Cities, Activity Book for Kids, as well as his latest books include Data Governance for Dummies and a Cryptocurrency Quick Start Guide. So please join me in welcoming him on stage.
Thank you, Sanjana. I clean up pretty nice, right? I need an updated picture. It's great to be in this room with all of you, and I'm so delighted how many people are here. And I should welcome also people joining by Zoom. I know there's quite a lot of people joining by Zoom. And if you're watching this on YouTube a few weeks later, a few years later, hello to you too. I know that people do that as well. So this is fabulous. I'm just delighted to be in Singapore, although my time here is coming to an end. Thank you to Professor Koo, who invited me and made me part of the family here, and I'll always be part of that family for good. It's been an interesting 6 or 7 weeks, but it concludes now, and this is like a highlight. This is a great way to exit my time here. Of course, I'll return to Singapore in a not too distant future. I've been here 6 or 7 weeks, and I've learned a lot, but I've only learned a tiny bit about this place. I really have. I figured out today, I've been thinking about it and talking to people. I'm like, I know a little bit more, but there's a lot more to know. But I do these things because, I visit sometimes a place just briefly, and 2 or 3 days, I do a keynote somewhere, attend a conference, and I leave. And it seems interesting to me, but I know nothing about the place I visit. And so spending a few weeks here, getting to meet people, getting to eat in the restaurants, do a bit of tourism stuff, but go to people's homes, it actually allows me to, and all of us, to learn much more about a culture than just quickly visiting. So for that reason, it's been a really great joy. I'm going to be speaking to you for the next 4 hours about. It's okay. Don't worry, it won't be that long. Just 3.5 hours. But I'm going to talk to you about data. But before I do that, I did want to add a little bit more to the wonderful, beautiful comments that Sanjana said about me. She read them exactly as I wrote them. But I'm going to now tell you a little bit more about my background and sort of my interest areas and why possibly, why I'm standing here and you're sitting there. Why do I have credibility to speak on any of these topics. I am a computer science guy. That's my background, actually. That's my joy. I like technology innovation, and I've studied computer science and information systems. That's the place where I sort of come from. But I got this invitation out of nowhere back in about 2011. A headhunter called me and said, hey, what would you think about helping to run a city? Run the innovation and technology for a city. I said, what city? Depends on the city. They said, Palo Alto. Now, some people know Palo Alto. If you don't, I'll quickly give you background. Often called the birthplace of Silicon Valley. There's some debate over that, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening. It is really the center of the action of Silicon Valley, even to today, although it's spread considerably across the Bay Area. And of course, Silicon Valley has lots of competition in the world today. That's the one thing we worry about, is that we maintain that leadership position. We never become complacent. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm a technology guy, and you want me to be the head of innovation and technology for the heart, the birthplace of Silicon Valley. That sounds like an interesting job. And I'm interested in how cities work. I mean, honestly, if you are somebody who has never thought for a moment, how do the traffic signals work? How do we get energy? How does the trash get taken care of? How does public safety, get taken care of? If you don't think about it, it just sort of happens. It becomes fascinating as a place to explore and suddenly learn. Wow, this is amazing. So much goes on behind the scenes. I saw the world then through a lens that I'd never considered before. So I said yes. But, I talked to the city manager, was cool, a guy called Jim Keane, very, very good guy. He's retired now from public life after about 35 years of being a city manager. I took the job partly because of him, actually. He just was a great guy, and I knew I could learn a lot from him about how cities run. And when we were kind of making the decision, because I was a little bit hedging, because I was a private sector guy, should I work for government? Is it the right move for me? Honestly, candidly, I'm, as a technology leader in other companies, my thing was always kind of break rules, move fast, sort of the Facebook motto, And then I'm going to work for a city. That's probably not a good match. But they worked on me, and the city manager said to me one day, he said, Jonathan, you got to make a decision. You got to commit. And I said, well, I'll make a bet on you if you make a bet on me. And we didn't know. We said, okay, we shook hands, and I did it. And what's the worst case? After a few months, it didn't work out, I would leave. But it worked out in very spectacular ways, in ways I didn't even anticipate. So here's the transformation that happened to me. I thought that I was going to go to a city and working with a great team and hiring great people and working with vendors and working with the community, we would change the community in a positive way. We would create new ways of delivering city services. Well, that kind of happened. I mean, actually, a little bit of that happened. But the surprise was, it wasn't that I changed the city, it was that the city changed me. I saw the world through a completely new lens. I didn't realize that the destiny of humanity was in cities. And this would be the great challenge, the great focus of the 21st century would be our cities. I didn't realize that most humans lived in cities. And through the 21st century, more and more would move into cities. You would be born into a city, live out a life in a city, and your life would be spent in an urban context for the majority of humans on the planet. I thought, that's pretty important. That's pretty important. As I started to travel, people were interested. What are we doing? How are we getting successes? And what have we learned in Palo Alto? As I would travel around the world to different countries, I realized very quickly that a lot of our cities are not functioning well at all. They're not creating a good life for everybody. I said, this is interesting to me. This is how I want to spend a lot of my life. Because if you can improve cities, you can improve the lives of millions, perhaps billions of people. So that's what happened to me at the city of Palo Alto. What else did we do there? I was there for 7 years. I thought I'd be there for 3. It was too interesting. It was too, I was like, I'll stay another few months, I want to get this thing done. I want to achieve it. So I kept staying. And finally, I'd done everything I wanted to do. It was time to do other things. In actual fact, the reason why I left was because I wanted to do what I was doing at Palo Alto, but with other cities. I didn't want to be just exclusive to this one little pretty town in Silicon Valley, although an important one. I thought I could be useful by helping other communities, and that's what I've been doing for the last 5 to 6 years. Now, when I joined the city of Palo Alto, just a little bit more of this story, because I think it is relevant to NUS cities and this topic. When I joined, the city manager said, what should be our vision? Now that we got you on board, and, we're paying top dollar for you, want to extract as much value as possible, right? What do you think we should do? And I said, give me a few days to think about it. I'll come back to you. I came back to him, and I said, we should try to be the #1 digital city in America. This is before we were using the term smart cities. And he said, wow, that sounds incredible. What does that mean? I said, I don't know, but it sounds like the right direction. Let's do it. Of course, I was only kidding, really. It meant, how can we bring digital to bear on all sorts of issues? Transportation, water, electricity, public safety, public works, libraries. Like, how can we make the engagement between the community and the city superior? And by the way, really key, how can we make it a model for communities all over the world? Because we think in Palo Alto, where you have the emergence of great phenomena that people all over the world use. Some people love the stuff we make. Some people hate the stuff we make. Or for better or for worse, a lot of us use the things we make. And so we could also do good. We can actually create new models for government using technology and try to share them with the rest of the world. So we went on this mission. 2 years, about 2.5 years later, we were named the #1 digital city in America. Very, very proud of that. And we kept that position for 3 or 4 years in the top sort of 3 until I left. I don't know what happened after I left. Because I moved on. I was ready to do the next thing. So we really did produce a lot of new ways of running a city, a lot of emphasis on digital. And by the way, you might think, well, that doesn't seem terribly innovative. It was 2011, 2012. That's 12, 13 years ago. That's a long time ago in tech history. Right? This is an industry that's barely 40, 50 years old. So 10, 12 years ago is a quarter of the entire history of information technology. This was a time, for example, when I would attend meetings with other CIOs in the region, from Cupertino and Mountain View and Redwood City, places you know of, big places where a lot of tech firms are based out of. And I would be at these meetings with other CIOs, and the question would come up, what's this whole cloud computing thing, right? I was saying we're going to be a cloud-first city. We're going to move everything to the cloud. Cloud is the greatest thing that happened to cities. The rest of my peers were saying, we don't like cloud because we don't have any control, and we can do things more securely. And so the topic, the discussions around some of these contemporary technologies were still very immature. I had 2 things. We were going to be cloud first and mobile first. And as you'll see in my presentation here, data would be at the center of our action. So that's a little bit about my sort of story. A bit of blatant promotion here. I'm an author as well. I've written many books. Here's some of my books. If you like what you hear today and you want to learn more, go to my name, reichental.com/books, and you can see, yes, I've written books for kids, for children, very popular. Recently, this was translated to Hindi, so it's for sale in India. And this one was translated to Persian. It could be bought in Iran. Otherwise, they're in English. And in fact, 2 lucky people today are going to get copies of my Smart Cities book. I could only carry a few in my suitcase, so I have 2 left. I kept them for this meeting. I've signed them, so I'll have to figure out during this presentation how I'm going to give them out tonight, but I'll figure that out. Maybe somebody really, really wants this book. It's for dummies. It's a brand, right? The biggest reference series in the world, 250 million books sold, not of my book, of the dummies books. And but I would have written the book the same way for any publisher. This is a brain dump of, basically over a decade of my insights about advising cities and building cities and running cities. And finally, this is the topic today. I wrote a book on this called Data governance, that's what we're going to talk about apparently today. And again, if you are interested in learning more, you like the style that I present, or even if you want to know more about this topic, this is a way to learn about it. And of course, all my videos and posts, all the materials I produce, and by the way, so much of it is free because I'm giving it away to you. I want the world to be helped by whatever I can share, the little humble piece of knowledge I can share with the world. You can go here. But I want to start with a story that will set the stage for us. So, if you are into cities, and I think you're here because you kind of have some interest in cities, this is a picture that gets you really excited, right? If a road doesn't get you excited, you're in the wrong room. You're studying the wrong topic. Literally, cities are about roads. That's a big part of it, right? And this is not a great road, right? You can see it's not really well constructed. It's got some potholes and it's beat up. What I didn't realize was city roads have a score. We call it the Pavement Condition Index. PCI, some of you know it. It may be known as different things in Singapore, but every country has a way that you measure the quality of roads. And I think right away we could relate to this, right? And when you work in a city and you ask people, or you get feedback from the community, they're going to tell you about the roads, right? You think they're thinking about sophisticated things, and they're like, that pothole outside my house is driving me crazy, and the city hasn't come to fix it. That's what the community really cares about. It's part of what they care about. Seriously, they care about budgets and roads. That's the two things they really care about, most communities in the world. I only half kid about that. So there's a pavement condition index, and it's given a number, right? So again, the data scientists in the room, this is like, you're going to drool at this, right? This is awesome. We love this, a spreadsheet with columns and rows that are, wow, I love this, right? Okay, now everyone's trying to figure it out, or those of you who like data. Well, these are streets, right? You got the latitude, longitude, right? You got the street name, and then you have a score, okay? This is the score of these streets. The score is between 0 and 100. 100 is a perfect road. It's just been surfaced. It looks beautiful. It's perfectly surfaced. 0 is kind of dirt road. It's not really a road, right? So these roads actually are scored quite well. They're scored quite well. So an elected council or a leadership team for a city says, well, we need to know, how do we prioritize which roads to work on? How do we figure out which roads are the ones that we want to fix next? And what they have been historically dealing with are pages like this, reams of pages like this with numbers. It's really difficult. So back in about 2011, 2012, again, 12 years ago, so it's ancient times in tech, the mayor, Yahweh Ye was his name, great guy, works for Google now, mayor of the city at the time, said to me, how can we make this easier? How can we make this data more easily a thing that you can make decisions about? How can the community get engaged and make priority decisions? Remember, this is one page of hundreds. And that's just who wants to look through that and sort it and all that, I said, let me think about it. Let me think about it. So in true Silicon Valley style, I got a napkin and I drew an interface, right? And I'm not kidding you. This is the actual picture of the thing I drew on a napkin. And if you think I'm kidding about the napkins, I'm not. This is how big business is done in Silicon Valley. In bars on napkins. It's I got an idea, I got to show you, and you draw it on a napkin. Because that's the only thing that's around when you probably figure a whiskey or a cocktail, right? So I drew this, and I brought this to the mayor, and I said, this is a better way. We'll have the picture of the road. We'll have the score somewhere. I don't know where its score is, but we'll have the description of the condition. And then people can actually upload pictures themselves. This is really great because this allows people to be really engaged in their community. And the mayor said two very important things to me, which I was expecting. He said, I love this. Well, 3, I suppose. He says, I love it. But there's 2 issues. it's expensive to build this, and it's going to take a long time. And the mayor was absolutely correct. If we were to take, if we were to take this and convert it to this, in a traditional way, this would be hard. It would be expensive. And that is a deterrent. I mean, there's lots of other things we can work on. So I had to go away and sort of think about how do we build this thing? How do we actually create this in a way that doesn't cost a fortune and doesn't take a long time? Now, we're kind of lucky. There's a little university in Palo Alto called Stanford University. You may have heard about it. It's a little, it's just nothing much happens there. And they also have a computer science department, and they have hackathons. They have these hacking sessions when programmers want ideas to work on. So I said, I'm going to get them to build it. I'm going to go up to students and have students build this thing. And so I found out that 2 weekends in the future, there would be a hackathon, so I plan to go up there. It helps, too, to bring the mayor with you. Students love that. So I go up, and I pitched the idea. I said, let's see if I go the right direction. Yes. If you take this, could you create this? And they're like, this is pretty easy, actually. Because you know what software developers want? This is the easy part. What software developers want is data. Because once you have the data, you can build cool things on top of it, right? That's really the sweet spot, is the actual core interesting data. So go up with the mayor, and I pitch the idea, and they're all in. Everybody wants to do this. And the payment is going to be pizza and soft drinks. They're not going to sleep, and they're going to work on this thing. And over the course of about 48 hours, they built it. They built it. And this is the actual picture. Picture of the road. See, this is a pretty good road, right? You see, this is nice. It's got a little crack here, but it's got a score of 83. And then the user can score it too. They can also upload pictures. It did exactly what I wanted. It took 48 hours, and it cost $0. Counter to what the mayor was saying. I was pretty happy about that. Right? It's like, I did it. Well, of course, you can't run a city like that, right? And that's not even the point of my story tonight. That's not even why I shared this with you. I shared this with you for 2 reasons. Number one, this is a great application to solve a big problem so our community can make better decisions based solely on data. The interface is easy. You know where we got the photos from? Google Maps. It was free, right? We didn't even have to take photographs. It's already done. What the developers needed was the data. The second thing was, I proved very quickly it's possible to do things differently. That's a key learning. If we continue to do the things we've been doing in the past all the time, nothing will change, right? But I came back to the mayor with a completely new idea, got a completely different result. Now, of course, we're not going to run the city like that, but we discovered that, number one, we would use our data, of which almost every community in the world has an abundance of, and we would think differently about how to solve problems. Data became so important because I was screaming about it all the time. It's like I would ask my team, I said, I noticed we have a lot of data. You're capturing everything, all our applications, everything. And what are we doing with it? Nothing. We're just capturing it because it's a byproduct of something we're doing. And I thought to myself, what would happen if we gave that data to people? Could they build solutions for us? Would the community build things that they wanted? Yeah, they would. When you ask communities to step up, they usually do. We just don't ask, right? If you want to know how a community feels about something, ask them, and they will tell you how they feel, right? So this was so important. We said, from now on, as we create new good quality, non-sensitive data, we're going to give it away to whoever wants it. And we call this open data by default. We were the first city in America after the federal government, because around about this time, we had the first tech president. I think Clinton would sort of argue with that. But President Obama, really was a tech president. He was totally a geek when it came to tech. And he says that. He's okay with that. So they were bringing a lot of new ideas. They were sucking up some talent from Silicon Valley, even from Palo Alto, to go to Washington, D.C. and build solutions. they have this idea of open data by default, and I said, that sounds good enough for us. And this is the actual proclamation, a photograph I took back in 2014, February 3rd, actually, just almost, that's 10 years ago. Well, look at that. Almost 10 years to the day. I just looked at it now. We wrote a proclamation that declared that from this point on, signed by the mayor, Palo Alto would be open data by default. What does that mean? It means that all data would be made available to anyone who wanted it, but only restricted by stuff that was sensitive or regulated or protected, right? This was a game changer. Once we started to do this, we could start to do really interesting things. Not only could we do it, but vendors and community members could do completely different things. We suddenly discovered people not only in Palo Alto, but all over the region, around the world, starting to build solutions around our data. Because we were giving it away. Good quality data, we were giving it away. Take this example. Here's an application that we customized. I called it Palo Alto 311. You have something similar here. Most communities have something similar. It's an app where if you see an abandoned bicycle or a pothole or graffiti, you take a picture, it goes to City Hall or the administration, and they fix it, and then they have to tell you when they fixed it, and then you can rate the service. It starts to hold the city administration accountable. So we're doing this. People love it. It's still actually used today. It's very much admired and used in the city. And it's in many, many communities across the US and across the world. But I'm looking at this thing, and I'm very happy that my team built it, and we're really getting good results. And I said, wait a minute, we're creating a lot of data. Like, we're getting amazing data here. What are we doing with it? Nothing. It's just a byproduct, right? So I said, what happens if we take the data and map it in near real time against the schematic of the city? And you get this. Here is a picture of the city, basically of a GIS picture of the city. And these numbers, it's sort of a heat map, represent the issues that are happening in different parts of Palo Alto. Like in near real time. Not real time, like the minute it happens. There's a little delay for a variety of reasons. And so you can now click on 54. There's obviously 54 tickets, 54 issues here. And you can figure out what's going on. Like, what is going on today in that part of town that we need to address? And if it's the numbers are high, we ought to kind of figure out the root causes and try to fix it. For the very first time in the history of Palo Alto, a city of about 100 years old, we could tell in close to near real time the cadence of the city, the rhythm of the city, right? For the very first time, right? Not super magic. We just took the data that we had, and we had a coder just quickly map it against the community. And we made this available to everybody. You can check this right now. This is online right now. If you go to data.cityofpaloalto.org, this is actually a near real time. You can see what's happening right now in the community. We're not shy. They're not shy about sharing that. So you quickly realize, as I start to give you these anecdotes and stories, that data has an exceptionally important role in our world, in our businesses, and in our cities. Now, when I was asked to write the book, Data Governance for Dummies, I had to research it. Now, I'd already been a tech guy for about, believe it or not, 30 years. And so being in a technology role, being a leader in organizations, I was exposed to all the kind of the management of data, the tools, the analytics, all the components. So I had a good knowledge, a good insight into the role of data in organizations. But I was asked to write a book about data, effectively. And one of the things I heard a lot of very early in my time was isn't data the new oil? Like, data is the most important. So, when you're writing a book, and I'm talking to the right audience here, when you are saying something of significance, you should have some data to support it, some research. So I did my research on it, did my homework. I talked to a lot of business leaders, talked to a lot of cities, and I'll just get to the punchline for you guys. I validated they were absolutely right. Data is the new oil today, and it is the most important asset in every organization in the world today. You might not have thought about that coming into the meeting today, coming into this session, right? And hopefully, perhaps during our short time we have together today, I will convince you of that. I will try to convince you that if it is the most important thing, are we taking advantage of that? Are we prioritizing it relative to its significance, right? Now, the answer that you'll find, I'll tell you, because we're here with friends, is we're not. Even though we know it's the most important asset, we're not prioritizing it, using it like it is. And that has to change. And I do a lot of work on that. I help organizations try to change that mindset and get the education and the tools they need to actually drive the change through data. Something incredible is happening. You know, as the world is being digitally transformed, what goes alongside digital is data, right? Where there's digital, there's data. Where there's data, there's digital, right? That's one of the T-shirts that I made, you know. And why is that? Because we are a hyper-connected world, right? Like, I don't know how many, there's about 100 people in this room approximately right now, and there's tons of people joining us. You have at least one device on your body right now that's connected, right? Some of you have two. You have maybe a watch. Some of you have three. You have a tablet. Who knows what else you have? But it's possible that there are 300 connected devices in this room, all, even though you're not doing anything, sending data and receiving data, right? So, you know, even doing nothing, we are producing high volumes of data in this room alone. Now multiply that by all the meetings, all the businesses, all the interactions in the world, and you have a new era, an era of big data. In fact, you call it the zettabyte era. Zettabyte. This is a word I didn't even know existed a few years ago, right? By the way, zettabyte is a 1 with 21 zeros, right? In other words, here's the very computer science explanation. It's a very big number, right? And, you know, whether they're machines that are connected, it's kind of throwing off this what we call data exhaust, right? Stuff we don't even use. And we're capturing sort of all sorts of logging stuff. We call that dark data. It's everywhere. And if we're able to analyze it, if we're able to use it in original ways, that not only is a competitive advantage, but allows us to innovate and do things we couldn't do in the past. This is a very big deal. So once leaders recognize this, or begin to recognize this, they want to become data-driven. They're like, okay, this is incredible. We have so much of this stuff. Everything we're doing, all these interactions, everything is creating this data. How do we actually start to be an organization that is driven, actually makes decisions based on this, drives our strategy? How do we become a data-driven? And this means basically that in meetings, when you're having meetings, are people bringing up the topic? Are you making decisions based on validated good evidence, right? Now, in an academic organization, this might sound very straightforward, but I can tell you in most enterprises, you know, the person who's making decisions, it's a lot of time it's gut, and it's the highest paid person in the room, right? This often, unfortunately, happens. Those are not great decisions, right? We have the data to make decisions. Leaders actually recognize this. They actually recognize this. When we survey CEOs of organizations, and even though this is a sort of a little bit of an enterprise slant, I would throw government into this bucket too. Government leaders recognize and want their agencies to be data-driven, 83%. That's actually a great news story. I have always the question, what about the other 17%? Right? What are they thinking? Like, nah, we don't want to be data-driven. We'll go on gut. Just feeling. How I feel that day, right? There is a role for feeling, by the way. There is a role. Before you start to challenge me on that later, somebody is thinking, that's the question I'm going to ask them. What about, like, experience and skills and wisdom? That is important, but that generally is a small slice. Today, we should be making decisions based on good quality data. Now, 83% of organizations want to be data-driven, but the reality is only about 32% are actually achieving that goal, right? That's not a good number. We've got to get that number up, right? We need the connection. We need the connection between the desire and the actual results. We need to make that happen. And that's generating a lot of good work for me and others. This is why you see this incredible new demand for tools, data tools, and data scientists. There's a growing profession, right? Where we need many more data scientists and data-related jobs than we are churning out from university or have available on the market. These are high-paying, good quality jobs, and we need millions of more of them. That's actually, isn't that a great news story, though, in a world where we're concerned about the future of what we'll do? When AI and robotics take all our jobs, right? Don't we? Nobody reacted to that. I think you're scared, right? You're like, yeah, we're scared of the robots and the AI. That's coming. And that's going to take away a lot of work for sure, displace it. Humans will do other things. But this is an area, data science and data-related jobs, where there will be increasing demand, and we're not meeting it yet. And you can see how so, overtly we're making ourselves problems here, right? This, for me, is this is a scary statistic, right? That 48% are making gut decisions. I expect maybe 5% or 5% of your decisions should be gut-based because you've seen it before. You've been there. You've had that. 20 years ago, I saw the same thing. Or 5 years ago in a different business, I saw this, we did this, and we had this great result. That's good. We don't want that. We want an organization that is data-driven, where the good quality data is driving good decisions. So then the question is, okay, we get you. You're all with me, some of you. If you've bought into what I've said to you, if you believe that this is important, what do we have to do? Well, to become data-driven, you have to have a data culture. Right? What is culture? Culture is the behavior, how people behave every day in an organization. Right? Do they come to work and think that I need to get the source of that data, I need the evidence, we can't make that decision before we have good data. Those types of things are illustrative of a data-driven culture. There's really three things like that lie on top of that make that happen. Well, the one thing that's not shown here is leadership is essential, and you know that. Without leadership in anything, nothing happens. Right? You have to have leaders who are charismatic, who have vision, then things start to happen. That's largely a requirement. But beyond that, we need to have a strategy. We need to have this thing called governance and data management, right? So this is where we get a little technical. We need strategy is pretty straightforward, right? We need a sort of a document or an agreement about where we're going to go, how we're going to get there. That's what a strategy is. We should change it as conditions change, right? Data management is fairly straightforward. Every company, every organization, every university, every government has data management. Once you have data, you have data management. You're probably storing it on computers, on servers, you're backing it up, you're archiving it, you're doing stuff. Now, that is not the same as saying you're doing it well or doing it right. It just says you're doing it. But you notice possibly that I didn't mention the middle one, data governance, right? That's because this is poorly understood and poorly implemented. And the remarkable irony is, data governance is where the action is. That's how you get the results, right? The others are really important. They're like administrative. But data governance is where you actually start to get the value. You leverage the value of data, and you innovate, and you reduce risk, and you start to see the change that you want in your organization. It's a play on a famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? The way people behave every day is going to always crush anything that's written in a plan. But if people believe in the plan, they will reflect that in the culture. Okay, if I've not convinced you so far, the data on data is pretty clear, right? When you look at things like income, business income, when you look at things like staff performance, when you look at attractiveness of a business, when you look at the level of innovation, the growth, organizations that are data-driven do better at every single category. And not even by a small amount, by a magnitude, by a big amount. Leaders have to hear this because they have to be bought into it, right? Sometimes they can think, data-driven culture, data strategy, data governance, data management, all sounds very bureaucratic, but by the way, it sounds really expensive. Well, it's not expensive if you're making a lot more money, if your business is growing, or your city is performing much better, right? It doesn't matter how much something costs if the outcome is much greater than that cost, right? And data-driven culture is one of those things that produces results. So I really want to focus now, just for the remaining time I have, on the data governance piece. Because if there's anything that I'd like you to kind of leave with today is, what is it? What is this thing? This is the question I get most often, as I know what strategy is, I know what managing data, but I don't quite understand what you mean by governance. And it all comes down to two simple things, right? That it's about increasing the value of that incredible wealth you have in the data asset, and about reducing the risks to your organization. Those are the two takeaways. It's as simple as that. In terms of describing it, in terms of getting there, it's hard. Now, when I finished writing the book and published it early last year, I looked at two things. Number one is, how many openings were there for data governance related jobs? That's always a good indicator. And also, how much were companies investing in this topic? And I was looking at this data over time. And it became obvious, reviewing this, as I should, being that it's data, I'm doing some data analytics. The amount of job openings for data governance were increasing and are continuing to increase. And the investment by businesses in the tools to make this happen, to increase value, decrease risk, was going way, way up. And it was expected to, over the next 18 months, to continue to increase. This is why you see so many companies jumping into this, and so many data companies, right? That's a good indicator that this is a growth area. And finally, leaders are beginning to recognize its benefit. So a few little characteristics about it. Here's the thing, right? You can have lots of data. You can have it managed. You can have a strategy. Turns out staff can't often find the data they need to do the work with it, right? How do you find the data? And how do you do that in government, right? We need to do a much better job of making available data sets and explaining them to people and how they can be used. One example, I love this, always worth playing with. This is the usdata.gov site, and this is their data catalog, right? Organizations have catalogs now. Governments have catalogs of data, right? So you can go in and type in, I'm looking for, our price list or our product list or a list of employees or whatever it is. You have to type that in and get that back and know, how do I access it, right? So data catalogs are really key, and this is a great one to play with. It's the federal government of the US, and not surprisingly, there's 1/3 different data sets and all sorts of really fascinating things. All sorts of really boring things too. But it captures the data there, and then you can use it and develop solutions. Just to bring it home, make it a bit personal, now here's the Open Data Portal, the catalog that my team built when I was at the city of Palo Alto. We said, learn about our city through data, make decisions, and build solutions, right? So it's very adamant about the value of this. And so you could, find data sets about city services. We had data for decades about library data, like what were people borrowing, not people's names, some of this is anonymized, but things like in 1998, what books were most popular? I don't know why you'd want to know that, but all I can tell you is you can know that if you want to know that, right? But mostly, we wanted people to be able to, first of all, recognize that we were being transparent. You could have any data you wanted, and so we're nothing to hide. If you want the budget data, we're going to give you the budget data. I've got to tell you this quick story. When we were building this, we didn't start with 100 data sets. The plan was, let's start with 2 or 3 really easy ones, because it gets complicated. You got to vet the data, you got to clean it up, you got to make sure it's good quality. So we asked the community, we asked a group of community members, what data is the most important data that you want to see? What do you think they said? Anybody know? What do you think? The city of Palo Alto, what did the community want to know? The data they wanted the most about? Yes, actually. Budget, but salaries in particular. Yes. They wanted to know how much all the employees of the city were being paid. Very good. But they wanted to know more broadly, how were we spending money? Like, not well, I can't come up with another thing, but it seems like this is the thing they were most concerned, and rightly so. I mean, it is taxpayer money. We're accountable to that, and they want to know how we're spending it. I made it known that one of the first things we were going to make available on our open data was going to be the most current salary information of all employees, including mine. So all of us, as government officials in the US, there is no privacy, right? Yeah, that's something you give up. I know this only too well, unfortunately, and so again, it's like if you buy into it, you want to be part of it, you want to do something very unique, because public service is really unique and important. You also give up something doing that. You don't have to do it for your whole life. You can do it for a few years, make a difference, and then go into the private sector, a bit like what I did. So you can imagine that who's interested in the salaries? The newspapers. They want to create stories, right? This is great. In a small community, it's a great thing to say, look how much he's earning, or, wow, there's such a big difference between those two people. They're doing the same job, So the newspapers hear that we're going to make the salary information available. And we have a relationship. It's like a little bit of a soap opera in a community. When you're at City Hall, it's like you're being watched. It's like, and they write about you the next day. It's you don't want to do anything. You want to be really clean in what you say and how you behave. Otherwise, it's a story on the front of a newspaper, right? It's a good test, actually. What I'm going to do. How would that look on the front of a newspaper? We actually called it the Wall Street Journal test, right? You never want to be on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal. But Palo Alto Weekly, or the newspaper in the community, Palo Alto Post, they were, actually Palo Alto Weekly, they were, I was talking to the guy who every year sort of would have this tug of war with the city, like, we need your salaries, and before I joined, they would send it over physically, like in paper form, and it's like, oh God. And then eventually they'd send in PDFs, and this is before we had all these cool tools for PDFs. And I said, no, we're going to give you it in any format you want. It's going to be in basic raw data format. You can download it as a PDF, as a comma delimited file, XML, whatever version you like. You can download it, and you can sort it. They're like, whatever, you're not going to do that. I said, okay. So we did it. we took the salaries, we put them on this thing. And we sent a press release to all the newspapers, and said, all the government employee salaries are now online. So about a day later, I'm walking down the street, and here comes the journalist. And I said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, he actually said, I was surprised. And he had this sort of, gloomy look to him. I thought he was going to be critical. I thought he was going to say something, it's so disappointing, whatever. He says, I was really surprised. It was much better than I thought you were going to do. You exceeded expectations on this, right? And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I want to hear. That's awesome. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. Get rid of the tension between the community and City Hall, create more transparency. Let's go and do stuff that matters. So it worked out really, really well. When we put the data in, companies started to build solutions, not us. We didn't spend any money. Third-party businesses started creating businesses. This one's called Civic Insight. And what does it do? It actually makes it easy for anyone in the city of Palo Alto to be able to find out what's happening in their neighborhood. Now, the underlying data here is permit data. And permit data is open. It's not in the United States. It's not a secret, right? But we never had a way for people to easily see it and understand it. What status is it at? People could click on it. They could see pictures, all the things they wanted to do. We didn't build it. The community wanted it. A third party built it and created a business. Now, when they created a business, they created jobs. When they created jobs, they created economic activity. So making city data available actually generated economic positive change. This is quite a big deal. They could then do this for lots of cities all over the United States, and if they wanted, they could go abroad too. So that's decisions. That's about making data valuable, making it available, searchable, queryable, all that sort of stuff, right? And you have to have some policies that drive this. So you got to write those. A little bit of bureaucracy. Don't overdo it. Because you don't want the bureaucracy to kill the thing you're trying to achieve, like the positive change you're trying to achieve. It's going to be right. It's going to be sized right, and we're going to be having a little conversation in a few minutes where we might talk about this. You don't apply the same data governance structure and hiring and tools in a little organization than you would with a Fortune 500 company, right? You make it the right size, and you operationalize it. A data governance piece of work is not a project, it's a program. It's something that will exist indefinitely. It's just how your business will run, right? The choices you'll make about how you collect data, how you protect data, who can use data, who can access data, how do you ensure that it's good quality? These are really important questions you have to ask about that abundance that you're getting. And you ask the question then, okay, a leader is probably going to reluctantly give you permission or approve it. They're going to say, okay, you've Jonathan, you made the case, right? We're going to invest a little bit. You have to show results, right? Otherwise, people think this is just bureaucracy. Otherwise, they think you're just putting in a layer of just something else I got to care about. Like, can I forward this data? Am I allowed to access this data? How do I know, who do I need to check with to make sure this data is good? And what are the rules governing that? No, you want to do it in a way that it makes sense and that you tell the people of the organization, here are the results we're getting. We're increasing revenue. We're innovating at a faster rate, and here's examples. You've got to demonstrate that value in order that people will buy into it and be part of this journey that the organization is going to take, right? Governments need to begin to think about data as a strategic asset, the most important asset, and they need to put in place strategy, governance, and management if they want to get results. And once they start to put that in place, they need to measure it, and they need to show results, right? This is really, really key. Wait too long, people will check out. They won't buy into it. And you won't get additional investment to see additional results. Now, as I kind of come to an end here, I did want to share one big government example for you. I have a love affair with New Zealand. Anyone that knows me, I went there a few years ago, and I visit a lot of places. I'm very lucky to visit the great places in the world. I finally get an invitation to New Zealand, and it's going to be, I'm going to do a talk at a conference. And I arrive and do my talk, and I added a couple of extra days so I could drive a little bit around the North Island. And then my plan was like, I'll be there a total of 4 days, whatever, leave back to the US. So I do great talk. The talk goes well. I do a little drive. I'm like, wow, this is such a beautiful place. Love the coffee, and so I get back to the airport. And I give the rental car back in. I go up to the gate finally, and I'm sitting at the gate, and I didn't want to leave. First time that ever happened. I was like, I want to stay. Something had happened. I sort of kind of worked it. I don't share this with a lot of people, but I'll share it with you, between us friends. And the 10,000 people who are going to watch this YouTube video. No, I tell you this. I have a background. I was born in Ireland, actually, and believe it or not, before I emigrated to the US and became a US citizen. And when I came to, I lived in Florida for most of my life. And then I moved to California. And I said, when I was in California, now that I'm here, I got to go to Hawaii. Because I'd seen all the Elvis Presley movies, right? And it was magical. I grew up with this idea, Hawaii is paradise. I'd never, I didn't think in my lifetime I'd ever go to Hawaii. But finally go to Hawaii, and you live in an amazing area here, but for me, this was like a paradise. This is like, wow, I couldn't believe what I just landed into, palm trees and beaches, and just lovely. Later on, I'm in New Zealand, and I'm thinking, why do I love it here so much? Because in New Zealand, there are mountains and lakes like in Ireland. There are palm trees like in Hawaii. I realized that if Ireland, if Ireland and Hawaii had a child, it would be New Zealand. So, sorry. Way to mess up a joke. But you got the spirit of it, right? if they had a child, because it was two of the things I most loved: the green and the countryside of Ireland and the palm trees and sandy beaches of Hawaii. So I fell in love with New Zealand. I went off on a real interesting detour there. That's okay. I'll come back, and so I'll go again. And another few days. It's not long enough. I said I got to stay. I got to stay for a while. So last year, actually, I ended up teaching at the Victoria University in Wellington, the capital, for 6 weeks, and I got to know the country really, really well. Toured extensively in the North and South Island, and I loved it even more. So I have this affinity with New Zealand. That's just a kind of a little story about me. But let me tell you about their data governance. So this is something I discovered because I'm there and I'm talking about these topics, doing similar talks to how I'm doing the talk with you today. And it turns out that New Zealand, as a federal government, as a national government, they call it national, I think, they decided to embark on a data governance journey. They decided that here we are, a national government, right? Not the local governments, a national government for the whole country, based out of Wellington. They have lots of departments, just like you have here in a big government. And they were all silos. They were doing good work, but they were not sharing data. They were not innovating, really. Departments weren't talking to each other. There was a lot of issues that they wanted to resolve. They wanted to run a better government. They wanted to run a better national government. And they decided the way they can do this is through a data governance strategy, a great data governance framework. That's a very big deal. Of all the ways they could solve these big problems, they decided it would be data governance that would be the way that they would do it. And so they started small and started to build this program, and they started to see results. Departments started talking to each other. There was greater collaboration, more transparency, more innovation. All the things that you would want to see, we started to see. So they started to get some good results. Of course, it wasn't without bumps, and it wasn't without investment and some training, all the things you got to do, but they started to see results. But I want to kind of actually drill into something very specific. In New Zealand, there are indigenous people. They're called the Maori people, right? The Maori people. And, they have a very different way of thinking about the world and interacting with the world. A very beautiful way, very different from what I'm used to as someone who grew up in a Western culture in Europe and in the United States. They think, they have a belief, and I'm no expert on this. I'm third or fourth party on this, is things have spirits. Right? Objects have spirits, and you have to acknowledge them. You have to treat things in a certain way. They also think that data has a spirit. This is incredible, right? Not that I need to fully understand that, but I have to respect and appreciate it. So if data has a spirit, it needs to be treated a certain way. So when they built this data governance program, they factored in how they would treat Maori data, which is a big part of the population, in a very unique way that respected their culture. That's a huge win for building bridges and bringing those communities together in a very positive way. So the New Zealand Data Governance Framework not only improved the functioning of their national government, but it also brought the communities, the indigenous and the non-indigenous communities, much closer together in a respectful way. Great story in my view. So as I come to the end of my talk here today, what do we need to do? What are the next steps? Well, we need to educate leaders, government leaders. They're not thinking enough about this. They're not doing enough about this. They have an incredible resource at City Hall, at their federal agencies. They have an incredible resource. And if they just prioritize it, they have a strategy, they govern and manage it, it's a game-changing proposition. We can deliver government in a much superior way without massive investment, but investing gradually over time. And as you get results, communicating the results. So we need to prioritize in our cities and in our governments a data-driven culture. So I wanted to just remind you, if you are interested in this topic, I just spoke for a little less than just about an hour. There's a lot more to say in this topic. If it's interesting to you, I have a ton of videos and books and all sorts of different articles and things that you can access, many free, through Reichental.com/learn. And I hope you will take advantage of it and enjoy it and learn. And if you are interested in this topic, go deep in it. And perhaps it might be a career for one of you. It might be a change of direction for somebody on YouTube or Zoom. And with that, I just want to say great thank you very much for your amazing attention and for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reichental, for that very interesting lecture. I would now like to invite on stage the moderator for the evening, Dr. Alvin Shaw. Dr. Alvin heads the data science, Dr. Alvin heads the data science practice at the URA Design and Planning Lab. His portfolio is concerned with the creation of digital capabilities and strategic data sets through research and cross-organizational partnerships. This includes planning and coordination of R&D projects funded by national research programs, as well as in-house research and technology development projects. Dr. Alvin holds a PhD in engineering from KU Leuven in Belgium, as well as a Master's of Design from LaSalle College of Arts in Singapore. His scientific and technical interests are in the applications of artificial intelligence, geospatial modeling, and simulation to urban planning, in particular related to integrated land use and transport planning. Please join me in welcoming him on stage.
Are we going to sit here?
I suppose.
We now invite the audience in the auditorium as well as on Zoom to raise their questions. Joshua and we will be handing the mics up. So yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Quick. Right.
Thank you.
Never mind about your questions.
Yeah.
Sorry. Please go ahead.
Right. No, I just want to say a few things. Right. That was
Sure.
a great lecture.
Thank you.
It really gives us some overview of how much has changed since I think technology started to infiltrate into the city and urban space. Right.
Yeah.
Incidentally, you began your lecture with streets. I began my research career looking at streets too.
Oh, cool.
Right? Back in the day, there was a platform called Fix My Street, which you might have heard of.
Yes.
Right? And it revolved around this data set. So yeah, I suppose everything converges on one point. Could have been there. But I hope we have a good conversation following the questions that our very eager audience have.
Sure.
So please go ahead.
Thank you. We know that good quality data takes time and is expensive to collect. Nowadays, we are surrounded by cheap sensors. You can monitor whatever you want. You can collect a bunch of data. Sensors are becoming very cheap. And citizens, lay people won't know how to detect which is bad and which is good data. Could you elaborate a bit about it?
So the assumption is that the government is collecting it and then going to make it available. Because if it's an individual, of course, we have no control over that. Is that the assumption correct?
But nowadays, people are collecting the data.
Yes.
And not only authorities.
Yes.
And people usually feel that their data are better than the data collected by authorities.
Yes. They need to buy my book, and then they would get the skills to be able to manage it. I don't know that there's much we can do if a person collects data and makes decisions from it. What I can say about the cities I've worked with is, I certainly would never advise that we collect sensor data and just publish it. There has to be a vetting process. And it shouldn't be highly bureaucratic or like a big showstopper, but it should be sufficient to make sure that the quality is good, that it is good data, that it is not sensitive data, or regulated data. So the way that we did it in Palo Alto is we had a structure, and we had certain people, like the city attorney would look at it, our emergency services director would look at it. I would look at it in terms of, from the computer science perspective. And then ultimately we would publish it. So we had that vetting, and it served us well. It serves communities well.
Thank you.
We have a question from the back or two.
Okay, hi.
Hello.
So my name is May. I'm a student in I'm a master student in international affairs, And so I'm coming kind of from more of a security and defense background. So my question would be more on what are the concerns that we should look out for as policymakers when it comes to cybersecurity and open data cities, and what are the drawbacks that some cities administration could think of when being asked to become an open data city? Because when thinking about it, all this data is then accessible by so many people that could have good and bad intentions. And I mean, cyber warfare and cybersecurity is such a prevalent topic nowadays.
Sure. Thank you for the question. In many ways, sort of the data we protect and open data are the opposite of each other, right? So open data is stuff you don't care. Like it's owned by the community. It's freely accessible. We'll trust people to do the right thing. We know that bad people will do bad things, but mostly people will try to do the right thing. What I can say, though, is governments are not investing sufficiently in cybersecurity. And we have far too many examples of that. We had a number of cities in the US that had ransomware attacks. Baltimore and Atlanta, two big major American cities, shut down for days, and in some cases a couple of weeks. So we need to spend more money. We need to hire more cybersecurity professionals in cities. When I joined the city of Palo Alto, my first executive decision was to hire a security manager. Now you might say the city didn't have a cybersecurity manager. No, they didn't. In fact, it was very, very low priority. 2011. It's a little while ago. It's much more serious today. The funny thing is, when I kind of challenged people, why don't we have a cybersecurity professional? They said we're not a big target. We're not being attacked. And my response at the time was, you don't know that we're not being attacked because we're not monitoring. We actually don't have the tools in place or the people, the expertise to know that. And actually, when we did start to install monitoring software, the city was very frequently a subject of attack. So I think the answer for you is, the best answer I can give you, and I say this to city leaders right to their face, you got to budget, you got to invest much more in cybersecurity, because this problem is not going away and it's getting a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
Maybe next. Oh, we have one more.
Hi, I'm looking at the city level. A lot of municipalities, local governments really don't have big budgets. So I imagine trying to get them to embark on this data journey is quite a big ask, and they really have to look at it quite hard-nosed way. So do you have any areas in your experience that you found is kind of the low-hanging fruit where local governments can not necessarily get efficiency or innovation improvements, but actually cost effectiveness in what they're doing that might be a first place to look?
Well, they got to do something. Like doing nothing is not, I don't think, is a good strategy at all. I mean, we'll go back to something simple. Can people find data? Like, if you don't even know what data exists and where it is and how to access it, I mean, everything else is much more difficult. So that's a nice entry point. It's also important that, like a city that's, again, is very limited on budget, start small, starts with data that's really important. An open data platform today, I mean, there's many open source ones, in fact. It's not expensive to do, and it's not hard to do it either. So rather than the city hiring people and building a complicated tool, whatever, do something simple, and then share it with the world, and then you'd be amazed that the innovation will come. Cybersecurity clearly is something that they have to put funds aside to. If there's a major cyber attack, there'll be a lot of regret later. It's like, you think you don't need insurance, but when something happens, you're happy that you have insurance. The last maybe example that I could give you that doesn't require really any investment but has a big impact is something called data ownership. I'll tell you, it's very funny because I talk about this topic with business executives all over the world, and often technology executives, and I'll say to them, do you have someone who comes to work every day and worries about the important data sets in your business? Like, is there 5 or 6 people that are worrying? And they all put their head down. They don't want to answer the question because the answer is no. We have a very poor understanding of what even data ownership means. If it's your most important asset, somebody needs to care about it. Somebody needs to come to work in the morning and say, and is it secure? Is it high quality? Is it complete? Is it accurate? And be accountable to that. So that's more of a training and responsibility action that a city can take with low cost but big impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since it's a dialogue, it's my turn to add the conversation.
This is your show.
Yeah. No, I mean, you speak a lot about this idea of data governance as a culture, right? And I think this is a very fresh insight into this whole idea of being data driven.
Yeah.
The challenge is, it's a new concept, and it's not going to be a simple undertaking. It actually involves very long-term commitment for any organization, and for cities in particular, city governments, it's fairly foreign, right? So what do you think is a realistic starting point to even conceptualize the build-up of data governance as a culture? Do you think it should be people, processes, or from another perspective? Perhaps you can share some views.
Yeah, no, it's really important. But part of the answer is a little bit repetitive of the one I just gave in terms of like some entry points. But I do think there's an education part too, and I think you're getting to that. City managers don't necessarily come to work and worry about this, but city administrators, city managers need to know about this topic, and the team needs to know about it too, the executive team. So there's an education part as organizations that help to educate governments, whether it's academic or an association, the International City Managers Association or the League of Cities in the United States. Some of the very formal, well-respected organizations need to be talking about this, because our mayors and our city managers go to these events. They need to hear many of the things I've been saying and have good examples of where it could be very, very beneficial, both in being able to deliver a better experience to the community, but also reducing the risk of a more digital, hyper-connected community. So I think the education is the entry point, and then start small, just choosing a few data sets, showing some value, and then building from there.
Great. No, just to add on to this, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things about data and the whole boom of the industry, right, is that people, when they first are introduced to this concept of data, are more excited with the cool and fancy things you can do with it, as you rightly pointed out, right? Essentially build applications, do analysis. But when it comes down to things like management, right, things like quality assessment, these things are often seen to be more of a chore, right? How can we reframe this, in your opinion, at least for, management would probably see the value of this, but for, the data worker, how can we position this to be an attractive career prospect?
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind immediately is in a strong, high-performing data culture, everybody has a role, right? It's not just people with, certainly not people just in the IT department, certainly not a leadership thing, but everybody has some sort of role, and they should understand what that role is. And we should provide, again, whether it's through whatever your system of communications is, whether it's a newsletter or an email distribution, maybe from the leader, what actual value was delivered through the work they're doing. I think also the staff member needs to know the essential nature of cybersecurity and how it's protecting the city, protecting the organization by the actions the people are taking. You need to explain to people why they're doing something, and then you need to show the results of their good work. And then maybe the last point to say is this will take time. Is responsibilities need to be baked into their job description. You don't get to not do data. It's like you don't get to not do email or to use a computer system. You're part of the 21st century. You're part of this organization. Data literacy is going to be part of what is required from you.
Great. I wonder if anyone has any.
Yep.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kritika, a PhD candidate working on governance of smart cities.
Oh,
So,
look at that.
dibs on the book, though. So, I had a question on actually crowdsourced data. So, a lot of discussion was made on just for crowdsourcing data today, either through tournaments or open sources or thing. Don't think you mentioned virtual labor markets, for example, if you're paying somebody to collect that data. So I'm curious to know how does that translate to policymaking? So crowdsourced policymaking effectively, or are there any pitfalls associated with it? And is there a type of crowdsourced data which is more suitable for policy design? A method of collecting that crowdsourced data which is more suitable for policy design from your experience? So.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, you will get a copy of the book because you asked for it. That's nice. And this is your topic, so absolutely. No, look, I think part of the answer is to be candid, to say this is not an expertise area of mine. So I don't have a great answer for you. But I will say this. One of the areas that I have seen is participatory budgeting, right, which you're probably familiar with. A lot of good work being done in it. Some places it's still experimental. Some places that's how they do sort of the first phase of any type of budgeting. And just to kind of give you a little explanation on that is, I was part of this twice a year for 7 years. The budgeting cycle in a city is rigorous and exhausting. And one of the things that, again, community wants, in the United States, a lot of communities want much more input into decisions. Way beyond just voting every 4 years. They want to actually be more active in day-to-day operations. And so we try to find ways to bring people in to the conversation, to be part of decision-making. And so there's this idea that you bring together people that are interested. We say, we have $500 million. We have all these issues. How would you spend the money? And we sort of have this dialogue, break into teams, and people make different propositions, and then it all has to reconcile because you don't have more money, right? And you have to kind of gain some consensus. So it's a kind of this, sometimes a day long, sometimes multi-day, and that doesn't become the ultimate budget, but it is a very well-respected input into the ultimate budget that's made. So it's showing good results, and some communities are very comfortable with it. Others are experimenting. Others have avoided it. You'd have to kind of almost like look at a community that succeeded and figure out what did they do right and why it was the approach that was suitable for them.
Okay, I have a question from the audience online.
Oh, wow.
Right, and I think this one is particularly interesting and timely. So I'm going to just state that we'll try and answer this live, right? We are in the age of AI, and we have seen what AI is capable of. So Mario, who's tuning in, is interested to know, how do we know if data is synthetic or fake or accurate? And, since AI is now able to dump data faster than humans, what should we do? And what are your opinions on this?
I'm trying to understand the question fully. So we are collecting data as a government, so we have a little bit more control over that, and we're vetting it, and there's a level of diligence that we're applying to it. What the bigger question is, because AI clearly can create fake information, hallucinations, and so one of the ways that we're thinking that we may begin to solve this is through the notion of a watermark, right? Something that certifies that the data is authentic and real. And in fact, this is part of much of the proposed regulation around the world for AI, is that, for example, an image would have a watermark in it, something that's detectable, computationally detectable, not visually detectable, that you would know that it actually has authenticity to it. Whether this provides us with a good solution is to be determined. Many of the tough questions in AI aren't answerable right this second here in February 2024. And in fact, the bigger questions, the more complicated ones that are going to come, there are more complicated ones that are going to come that we will have to grapple with as a society and make a decision.
I think personally, the issues will arise when we crowdsource such information and we can't distinguish what's synthetic and what's the real stuff that people's giving us, right? And when we are building tools to do ground sensing, and part of that ground sensing is information that's created by people in response to us, yeah, that's where the risk is. We don't know who's giving what to us. And I think the need to verify that information, it's going to be quite important, right? So yes, I hope, Mario, we did respond to your question. You left a very long list of questions, but I've got to moderate this. So perhaps you can take one from the audience.
Hi, I'm Valen. Thanks for the lecture. I have a question on the data-driven culture. As we push for this culture to be, to have in an organization, it seems there is going to be additional workload, mental, physical. How do we push for a smoother transition for maybe people on the ground level to transition to this data-driven culture? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand it.
My question is mainly, it seems like there's more work to be done at this on the ground level, like maybe for the workers, they have to collect data, to log in the data and also maybe data literacy, and this is additional work on top of their own job scope. So how can we enable a smoother transition to a data-driven culture in, let's say, organizations like companies or MNCs?
Okay, thank you. Well, gradually is the answer. You can't, we know over time that you can't mandate a data culture, or you can't actually mandate a culture. Cultures are fostered. They are created through strong vision, strong leadership, incentives, and so you got to create the right conditions and recognize that every organization is going to transition to this, if indeed they ever do, at their own rate, right? Now, if you're a new organization, you start on day one, we're going to be data-driven, that's something else. But most organizations they've been around for a while. Cities have been around for a long time, and they're introducing something new. So I think it has to be done consistent with the existing culture, done over time. Learn what's working, what's not working, stop what's not working, continue what is working, and start some new things. Finally, I love that you brought up data literacy, right? This is a key part here. We haven't really, as a society, yet recognized that in addition to reading and writing and mathematics, that data literacy is probably another core skill required to succeed in a 21st century economy. So people do need to acquire skills they don't have, and in universities and schools, greater emphasis needs to be placed on learning data literacy. Any others? Oh.
Wow.
Good questions.
Yeah, good questions, and it keeps coming. I'm surprised. I prepared a whole list, but I probably will not ask them.
Yep, thank you very much for the lecture, Dr. Reichental. So I just wanted to ask about, with regards to changing mindsets in terms of data governance and the importance of data. You gave several examples from the US, from New Zealand, things like that. I suppose in the Singapore context, it's a little different because, maybe a little controversial, but our government's a bit slow to this kind of mindset of providing information, and we don't really have the culture of Freedom of Information Acts that you have in the US or other countries. So what would you say is a good way to change this mindset in a very where the Singapore government says that you don't really need to know this data, and so we don't really need to provide this data for you?
That is deep.
I travel enough to know not to answer that question. No, I won't answer that question because I don't think it's appropriate for me to. But yes, I put a lot of emphasis on opening data and making it available to others. But let's not lose sight of the fact that typically data governance is largely done behind the scenes. It's done within the organization. So the question might be, or the assessment might be, to what degree is data governed within Singaporean enterprises and government entities? Is a government entity within Singapore getting the value they think they should from certain data sets to deliver more innovation? Is it sufficiently secured? And is it accessible by the people that should have access to it? So this is sort of maybe a kind of first of all, recognizing that this has value, but also making an assessment of where you're at and figuring out where that gap might be to get you to a better place. So, a lot of data governance, by the way, lives and exists in the private sector, right? We now see it emerging in a significant way in the public sector and within academic organizations too.
What are your thoughts on, benchmarking the effectiveness of data governance in an organization, and perhaps at another level, trying to assess the maturity of that culture within the organization? Do you have some perspectives on this?
Yes, in fact, maybe one of the early steps you take in determining, like if you want to change your environment and you believe there's a more positive way to do something, you need to understand where you're at, right? And then sort of figure out the journey to get from where you're at to where you want to be. So you've got metrics, right? I actually wrote down a couple of examples of metrics here, if I can put my finger on them. Maybe not. Yes, okay. Things, well, look, at the heart of all of this is data quality, right? So data quality are things like how complete is a data set? How many errors are in it? When was it last updated? How many people access it that should access it? So you start to see quite a lot of neat metrics. You can benchmark that around your data quality. Then how many issues occur in the organization that are data related? Like issues that happen, like for example, with system integration. There's these in many reasonably complex organizations. You have batch processes that move data and they transform it and they do cool things with it. They sometimes fail, right? And that is often a reflection of data management and data governance. If you're getting good quality data, moving that data, you have good processes in place, you should see a drop in the error. Also things like person logging, like I need access to this data, I should have access to it, but I don't have access to it, or I did have access to it, I don't have access to it anymore. Tickets like that are another way to actually validate. What was the second part of the question after the benchmark?
Well, it's people aspect, right?
Yeah.
How do we recognize that an organization has matured, right? Or maybe we can ask the question in an anecdotal way.
Yeah.
Are you able to recognize, organizations that are at their infancy versus one that's perhaps more mature?
Yeah. Some of it will be obvious, like do you have data owners? Do you have policies around data? Do you have a chief information security officer? Some things you could, in 5 minutes, you could determine if this is a more mature organization than one that maybe hasn't really been putting enough emphasis on it. So those are some of the initial ways to determine. Maturity is also where if you're able to sit in on meetings or listen to how people speak, there's a language that's used in a data-driven culture. People ask certain questions a certain way. They say, what's the evidence for that? Or could I see the report on that? And they know how to use Tableau, or they know how to use some of the cool features of Excel, right? We still do a lot of the world's decision-making and financials on Microsoft Excel. A lot of the world runs on spreadsheets. We could make an assessment of tool usage and sophistication on the tool usage. We do have to train our people. There should be no expectation that a person can fully embrace a data culture and be comfortable with it on day one. I'll tell you this quick anecdotal story. It has to do with project management. I had a staff member a few years ago who every time, and their job was project manager, and they would do a project, and after a few months I would check in, how's the project going? And invariably the project was late, wasn't going in the right direction. They were spending more money, whatever. And I'd give him some advice. He'd get some advice from his manager, and he'd do another project. And again, we saw these issues, and we're like, something is not right here. You're not succeeding as a project manager. And then I had the thought to ask him, have you ever been trained in project management? And he said no.
Okay.
He had no formal training in project management. So here I was, now I didn't hire him, I came to the organization, he's part of my team. Here he was, I was giving him the responsibility of leading important projects, and he was failing because we hadn't trained him. So I said, stop, no more projects. We're going to train you. And we sent him to project management school. He got his project management professional certification, his PMP, and he became one of our best project managers, and his life was better, the projects were better. So we shouldn't expect people to be superstars in work if we haven't invested in them and given them the skills to do the work. And that applies to data, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Those are really great insights. I wonder if we have further questions.
We do, but oh, no, sorry. He's at the mic.
Ah. Is there someone at the back?
No, if you want to keep the conversation going. Hi. If I'm making a plug, my title is actually data governance, as of like 3 weeks ago. So
nice. With who? With who?
The Office of Data and Intelligence within NUS.
Amazing.
Yeah, isn't it? So they took me out of the R&D kind of thing, and now they're escalating up to management level. It's kind of cool. So I'm kind of finding my way here. But
nice.
Thank you for showing the green Stanford campus. It's wonderful. But I'm going to connect you back to Alvin. When he said he used your data, right? How do you surface that kind of thing? So you release data to the world, you release data to the organization, but you then want to know downstream usage, probably not just from the unicorns that could build it into an app and then surface it up to the city.
Yeah.
So what's the strategy for that kind of bubbling up, or at least getting the pulse of that kind of thing?
Thank you for that. Well, congratulations on your new work, and I'm so happy you're here. Hopefully, I said something that was accurate tonight, and you'd be able to validate it. We were always curious. It's a great question. We were always curious, what were people doing with their data? And I'll give you the candid answer: we didn't know, right? And so the question is, do we need to know? Yeah, I think you're saying it. We eventually determined that hopefully there's people getting value from it, and then if we discover it or if they let us know, we're very happy. But we don't need to know what they're doing. You don't need to know what others are doing with your data, unless it's nefarious and comes back to haunt you at some point. But it typically doesn't, and most people try to do the right thing. I was always just fascinated when I would be maybe watching a YouTube video or whatever, and suddenly there would be somebody who would mention our data, and I'm like, wow, it's been used in Melbourne, Australia, and I didn't know for a certain reason. My hope, really, if it's used beyond the region that it's applicable to, in this case Silicon Valley, we're inspiring somebody. We're actually inspiring this kind of work in other places in the world.
Cool, great. Okay, maybe I will end this with a final question.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is something that I thought may come to the minds of people in management, and it's about the costs involved in doing all of this, right?
Yep.
Creating new jobs, new processes, people spend time and training, infrastructure, all new things, right? So I suppose you must have dealt with all this friction within an organization like a city, right?
Yeah.
What was your approach, and can you share some experience on how do you start to convince people to accept the build-up of such processes and roles?
Yeah. It's the number one response that most leaders have to this topic. When you have explained what it is, they get it, and then they say, it sounds very expensive, and it sounds bureaucratic, and we have other things to do. And in a private company, in a for-profit business, I should say, everything is focused on let's make money, and anything that seems like an overhead or bureaucracy is not very attractive. And when you hear certain people talk about data governance, they will talk about policies, and they will talk about risk, and these are not necessarily exciting things for leaders.
Yeah.
I tend to talk about this topic through the lens of innovation, actually. That data allows us to make better decisions and to innovate faster, to understand our customers, understand our communities. So really focusing much more on the value part of it rather than the sort of the more kind of behind the scenes, like insurance. You got to kind of do that because it's important, but we don't really want to talk about it. But we want to, if you're a leader, if you're a city manager or you're a CEO, I want to convince you that this incremental investment over time will start to actually bring enormous value. Remember early in my slides, I said there's a direct link between data governance and company performance. Direct. This is not a gray area. When data governance is done positively in a really right way, companies make more money. They have higher retention of staff. They innovate more greatly, and they reduce their cybersecurity events. They do reduce risk. So I think for the reluctant organization, super focusing on value and innovation, you got to make mention of the protection, the kind of risk part of it too. That's really key. And then it's like, let's not spend a lot of money, but we do need to assign some people with some responsibilities, not full-time, part of a job. We've got to do things like, data ownership, data stewardship. These are kind of the roles that need to be in place. What's called a data governance board, some sort of committee entity that actually has oversight for this. So there's a bit of a talent part, there's a people part to it. And then, you've got to understand the data you have, the valuable data. Not all data is equal. I think that's an obvious statement, right? So in any data governance environment, you're focusing on high-value data, typically. There's going to be a lot of data. It is what it is. Just forget it. What you want to do is really focus on what's important to you. So that's actually going to be a subset. So you're more laser-focused on that. And then there's going to be a bit of a kind of, let's take a leap and start to invest in some tools. Some better analytics, better reporting. And let's start to see, can we drive, our strategy, our vision in a way that data governance and good data manager can support. So yeah, there's a diplomacy to this, and there's just on the ground facts, right? These Baltimore and Atlanta and the other cities around the world that were really damaged financially and reputationally, and also weren't able to deliver services. How do other cities avoid that? They got to do some smart moves, and one of them is begin to think of what does data governance look like in their organization.
Great. Right? Yeah. Oh, wow.
Please.
Very short.
Yes.
I have to ask selfishly, can I have the second copy of the book?
You can. That solved the problem. Thank you very much. Yeah, totally.
And I hope everyone is happy with the evening.
Yes. Is that it? We're concluding.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.